Now, we slip quietly into the salt-stained tatami of a coastal hut, where the air is cold, the walls are thinner than your patience, and the sea wind has no respect for doors. You'd never think that waking up in the Edo period would feel like losing a bet with time itself. But here you are, cocooned in a bed made of straw that pokes in all the wrong places and carries the unmistakable perfume of mildew, dried fish, and communal breath. There is no mattress. There are no pajamas, just a threadbare kimono that's been salt-washed so many times it crunches like overcooked seaweed when you move. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your back already hurts. You're somewhere between 23 and 40, hard to tell anymore. Since your joints have been aging faster than you, this isn't the luxurious Tokyo of ukiyo-e prints. You live in a shack that squats on the edge of the village like it knows it doesn't belong in polite society. It's part home, part fish locker, part wind tunnel. The roof leaks occasionally, which is a generous way to say rains indoors, and the floorboards creak like they've got opinions. You're not alone either. Your family sleeps nearby, rolled up in their own nests of straw, snoring softly or loudly, depending on how much fish you had to eat the night before. There's no privacy here. Your life is a group project, and everyone's failing quietly together. As dawn arrives, more like a soft blue-grey gilt than a sunrise, you begin to smell it, the ocean. A smell so potent, it's probably begun to season your bones. But it's not that charming seaside breeze you find in candles. It's low-tide rot mixed with old nets, dried kelp, and the eternal sigh of marine life that wishes you'd leave it alone. You stand up, or try to. Your joints sound like someone shaking a bag of seashells. You throw on your day's outfit, which is exactly the same as yesterday's, because you own two garments and one of them is currently drying over a line that sags with the weight of yesterday's regrets. Your feet slip into straw sandals, worn, splintery, and as comfortable as a wooden spoon taped to each foot. You hobble outside, avoiding a chicken that's decided to lay eggs exactly where you usually trip. The dirt path crunches under your feet, frozen slightly from the night's cold. You stretch slowly and watch the other huts breathe out little puffs of smoke as the rest of the village begins to stir. You nod at an old man passing by who's been fishing longer than you've been alive and smells like he's never stopped. He doesn't say a word, just grunts in the universal language of back pain and rice inflation, and then it's time to check your net. That old thing. You patched it last night using thread so weak it might have been spun from wet paper. But that's all you had. You sling it over your shoulder like a soggy yoke and make your way toward the shore. Historians still argue whether Edo-period fishermen had designated sleeping mats or just lived in a constant state of crouch. Either way, you're definitely somewhere between rest and resignation. You glance back at your hut one more time, watching the wind wiggle through a gap in the wall like it pays rent. Your day hasn't started yet, but your exhaustion already has. The path to the water is more of a suggestion than a road. It weaves through thick grass, low rocks, and puddles that form whether or not it rained. You trudge through it anyway, like someone doing penance for a sin they can't remember committing. Your sandals soak up moisture like emotional sponges. Every step squelches a little louder than the last, as if nature itself is trying to discourage your optimism. At the shoreline, the waves are already at work, lapping, retreating, lapping again. The sea is always working, just like you. It's not poetic. It's just loud and salty and never asks if you're tired. You lower your net into a nearby cove, the same one your grandfather probably used, and his grandfather before him, and possibly a ghost or two. The net itself is a patchwork of memories and desperation. You've mended it so many times that the original string is more of a myth than a thread. You anchor it with stones. Say a little half prayer to whatever god hasn't gotten bored of fishermen yet, and move on to your trap baskets. These are wooden, splintered cages baited with yesterday's scraps. They smell like rejection and fermented regret. You haul one up slowly, straining. Inside one crab, half dead, possibly asleep, and a whole bunch of seaweed that no one asked for. This is breakfast. You walk back with your loot cradled like it's precious because it is. Food isn't guaranteed. The sea gives when it wants to, and today, it's in a minimalist mood. By the time you return, smoke's already curling from your hut's tiny fire pit. Your wife, or maybe your mother, depending on who survived the longest, has started the morning fire with sticks and a deep sense of obligation. The pot over the fire is filled with rice gruel, not rice. Rice gruel. The word gruel should be enough of a spoiler. You clean your crab, remove anything vaguely threatening, and toss it into the pot. It adds a hint of something that was once a live flavor. The seaweed joins the party, because texture is an afterthought. You eat slowly, carefully, not because you're savoring it, but because you can't afford to choke. Medical attention consists of being told to lie down and see if it gets better. Historians still argue whether Edo-period coastal communities actually preferred seaweed or simply endured it due to necessity. Either way, you're now chewing it like it owes you money. Meal done. It's time to check the village notice board. There's a wooden post near the temple where updates are posted. Taxes, fishing quotas, reminders about not hiding fish from the collectors. You and the other fishermen gather around, squinting. None of you can read all the kanji, but you've memorized the ones that mean pay more and do not complain. A man in formal robes walks by, possibly a low-ranking samurai sent from the domain's magistrate. He looks bored. You bow. He doesn't. That's the dynamic. He doesn't fish. He doesn't build nets. But somehow he gets a portion of your catch. You return to your hut, trying not to think about it. There's mending to do, rope to twist, nets to fix, baskets to scrub. Your entire life is maintaining the tools of your survival like a medieval IT technician, constantly rebooting soggy hardware. Your fingers are always pruned, your knees always sore, and your spine hasn't felt straight since childhood. Remember the straw bed from this morning? You're already longing for it again, and the sun isn't even at its peak. The midday heat arrives not with drama, but with indifference. The sun just climbs up, plants itself above you, and starts baking everyone like a petty landlord, turning up the thermostat out of spite. Your skin prickles under layers of old cotton that never quite dried from yesterday's ocean spray. And of course, this is the exact moment your neighbor's son asks for help hauling in the family's largest fishing net. Because muscles don't matter, social obligation does. So you go. You always go. You all go. Every fisherman, regardless of creaky knees or recent stomach cramps, trudges toward the water again. The net is thick, waterlogged, and shaped like a punishment. It takes 6 men to pull it in and 7 to complain about it. You grip the edge and yank. It moves about 4 inches. Encouraging, eventually. Through groans and muttered prayers, it emerges from the sea heavy with fish, mud, shells, and one very confused eel. This is a good haul, and good means bureaucratic interference. By the time you return to the village path, the collector is already there, wearing a short sword he probably hasn't drawn in 5 years, and the expression of someone who believes fish magically appear in baskets. He has a notched stick and a suspicious eye. Taxes are paid not in coin, but in fish. The Tokugawa shogunate is many things, but flexible about taxes is not one of them. 1/3 of your catch goes to the domain. Another portion goes to the shrine. The rest, you and your family split it and pretend it's enough. You hand over your best fish. Why? Because if you don't, the worst rumor that can cling to you hoarding starts to spread. And a hoarder might as well mean enjoys visits from magistrate enforcers and the occasional confiscation. Historians still argue whether coastal taxes varied greatly by domain, or if every village just made up its own rules under a cloak of confusion. Either way, it feels like creative oppression. You try not to look bitter as the collector sniffs your best catch and walks away like he earned it. Back home, the village square is buzzing, not with joy, just noise. Kids running barefoot over sharp stones, women gathering water at the communal well, which smells faintly of rust and despair. An old man whittles a stick not for art, just to give his hands something to do so they don't start remembering pain. It's time for your mid-afternoon tasks, which is a misleading phrase. It implies options. There are none. You sit on a low stool, threading fresh rope from plant fiber that cuts tiny grooves into your fingers. Over and over, until you can't tell where the rope ends and your skin begins. Occasionally, someone walks by and tells you about a new boat built in the next village over. You nod, feign excitement, then keep weaving. You won't see that boat. You won't ride in it. You'll hear stories about it until those stories get old and turn into stories about a different boat. You do not dream of retirement. You do not dream of owning land. You dream of decent weather and maybe one fish that's bigger than your hand. A dragonfly lands on your wrist. You don't move. Because for once, something rests on you without asking for anything. The moment passes. You stand, stretch your aching back, and head toward the drying rack. Fish guts, salt, and sunlight. This is the scent of your entire lineage. You rearrange the drying fish so they don't mold. You pray they stay edible, or at least chewable. Dinner will be what the sea forgot to keep. Evening doesn't sneak in, it drops suddenly, like a curtain yanked down over a too bright stage. One moment the sky glows, the next it bruises into purples and oranges. You'd think sunsets this beautiful might be the cause for a village-wide pause. A moment of poetry. They're not. They just mean you're behind on cooking. Your stomach reminds you that you haven't eaten since the sun was barely up. And now, finally, it's time to enjoy what you've earned, or more accurately, what didn't get confiscated by the taxman. Tonight's dinner fish. Again, salted, grilled, dried, or fermented into something the nose considers a crime. Maybe a bit of rice. If you're lucky, but rice is expensive, and your luck is frequently on strike. You sit cross-legged on the wooden floor of your one-room house. It creaks like it's reconsidering the whole standing upright idea. A fire crackles in a tiny hearth made of stones scavenged from the beach. You hold a thin stick, skewered with grilled mackerel if you don't chew slowly. You'll finish before your thoughts even catch up. The smell is comforting, salty, smoky, a little sour where the fish skin burned. You savor the texture rubbery, but in a nostalgic way. Kind of like your childhood, if your childhood involved more fish than toys. Historians still argue whether most fishermen truly lived at subsistence levels, or if coastal communities had better access to trade and surplus than inland peasants. You don't know, but you do know that this meal won't fill you up. And tomorrow's won't either. Across from you, a child gnaws on a rice ball like it owes them money. Another pokes a fermented turnip and frowns at the world. These aren't your children, they're your neighbors. But the line between yours and everyone's is blurry in a fishing village. You feed who's hungry, and you borrow when you're the one in need. Debt is not written down here. It's remembered in favors, and it grows faster than mold on wet rope. You finish your meal in 8 bites and a sigh. Outside, the air carries that blend of low tide and wood smoke. A few villagers gather around the communal fire, talking in low tones about waves, bad nets, and who got what from the sea today. Someone tells a joke about a man who mistook a jellyfish for a god and offered its sake. You laugh because it's polite, and also because it actually happened. Occasionally, someone brings out an old shamisen 3 strings, patched wood, and a personality all its own. The music is wobbly but warm, like a lullaby hummed by someone who once forgot the words but made up better ones anyway. You lean back and stare up. The stars blink into view one by one, slow and patient. The Milky Way spills across the black sky like someone spilled rice and forgot to sweep. A mosquito whines near your ear. You slap too late. It's fine. You're used to it. Quirky fact, some Edo fishermen believed in sea spirits called umibozu, ghostly figures, that could sink boats or demand bowls of miso soup before letting you pass. You never saw one, but you still mutter a greeting to the ocean at night, just in case it listens. You stretch your arms and feel the ache deep in your shoulders. Your spine cracks like a distant bamboo forest. You're not old, but your bones are overachievers in the category of early degeneration. Still, for all the exhaustion, there's a rhythm here, a slow, dragging heartbeat that you share with every family along the coast. It beats through salted hands, half-empty bowls, and stories repeated until they become truth. And just like that, it's time to sleep. Your bed is generous. If you enjoy sleeping on woven straw that scratches like a gossiping cat, You lower yourself onto the tatami mat laid over packed dirt, with a flat buckwheat pillow that gives all the support of a loaf of bread that's given up on life. The room is dark now, lit only by the orange glow of coals tucked under an iron pot. The scent of fish lingers, as it always does. It clings to everything: your sleeves, your hair, your dreams. You curl under a futon that is equal parts cotton, dust, and unmet expectations. It traps heat like a nervous secret, and in winter, it's the difference between surviving the night and waking up with toes that no longer believe in circulation. In summer, however, it's your personal sauna minus the luxury, the steam and any sense of wellness. A rat scurries in the ceiling. It's probably the same one from last night, and the night before. You've named it Taro. Taro has a family and possibly a tax-exempt status based on how confidently he explores your rafters. You make peace with him, provided he doesn't nibble your rice stash. You close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come fast. You're tired. Yes, but also sore in too many places to count. Your hands throb where the net ropes chafed. Your back feels like it has folds in it. Your knees whisper insults every time you shift position, but these aches are familiar, like annoying relatives who visit every evening. You'd miss them if they stopped showing up. Maybe outside, the waves hush against the shore. That sound, the shh of ocean breath, is your lullaby. If you concentrate, you can almost forget the blisters between your fingers or the tickle of lice in your collar. Almost. Historians still argue whether Edo villagers valued sleep as sacred or treated it like just another necessity squeezed between obligations. There's a theory that fishermen developed short, segmented sleep patterns, catnaps between tides, power downs during low waves. Whether it was by design or exhaustion, you've mastered the art of being semi-rested. You dream in flashes. First, you're chasing a fish with human eyes. Then you're stuck in a net underwater while a laughing monk throws coins at you. At some point, you wake up just enough to scratch your ankle and shift to the other side. Then it's back under, around midnight. Someone yells. A drunk neighbor, a storm warning. Hard to tell. You hear shuffling feet, a baby crying, and then silence again. Life here doesn't pause, it just dips its toe into different kinds of noise. Your dreams slide into something softer. You're younger. No debts yet. Your father teaches you how to tie a net properly. His hands move slowly, deliberately. You mess it up anyway. He laughs and says, "Fish don't mind ugly knots." You wake up near dawn, unsure how many hours have passed. Could have been 3. Could have been 7. Time isn't measured here in clocks, but in aches and sunbeams. Quirky fact, some Edo coastal villages had a ritual where people whispered their worries to the sea before sleeping, believing the tide would carry them away. You once tried that, mumbling about fish quotas and toe fungus. The ocean didn't reply. But the next day, your neighbor tripped and dropped all his mackerel into the mud. Coincidence maybe. Satisfying very. Your body still craves sleep, but the sky is getting lighter, and the ocean is calling again. It always does. You roll out of your sleeping corner, greeted by the sharp smell of dried fish, sea salt, and something suspiciously moldy. No one asks how you slept. No one cares. Sleep is a private delusion, something you do just enough of to keep hauling nets without falling into them. You pull on your same work kimono, still damp from yesterday, because washing clothes is a luxury saved for holidays, weddings, and divine intervention. Breakfast is not so much a meal as it is a ritual of lowered expectations. You slurp down rice gruel thinned to the consistency of betrayal, with a sad sliver of pickled radish. If it's a lucky day, there might be a leftover sardine, dried and salty enough to rehydrate your soul through your tears. A sip of tea washes it all down if you're lucky enough to have leaves that aren't already on their 4th boil. Still chewing, you grab your tools, net, rope, basket. Each item is worn like your spine, patched like your dignity. You head down to the shore. The sun hasn't fully risen, but it's already making promises it probably won't keep. The breeze carries a crispness that says, it's going to be a long one. You reach the boat, tied with rope that's frayed but loyal. It's a small, shallow-hulled thing made of pine and hope. You and your partner push off from the beach. The water is deceptively calm, like a bored cat deciding whether to ruin your whole day. And just like that, you're rowing out to sea. Fishing isn't romantic, it isn't quiet reflection, it's not meditative. It's back-breaking work, soaked in fish guts, under an indifferent sky. You row until your arms buzz with fatigue, then cast nets that fight you like angry ghosts. You wait. You pull. You repeat. Over and over. A mainstream fact during the Edo-period. Fishing communities were regulated by local lords or sea guilds who taxed catches, controlled where you could fish, and sometimes dictated what species you were allowed to catch. You do not, and will never, own these waters. You are merely renting them at full price, no receipts. Your catch is average: a dozen mackerel, a stubborn eel, one surprise octopus that tries to climb your arm like it's applying for residency. You don't scream, you just sigh and plop it into the basket. The eel, you're fairly certain, is judging you. You row back as the sun climbs higher, turning the waves into blinding shards of reflected light. Your skin prickles with sunburn. You'd think by now you'd be used to it. You are not. By mid-morning, you return to shore, legs shaking slightly as you step off. You haul your basket onto the sand. It's lighter than you want. Your family will have to stretch this across 2 meals, maybe 3. You mutter something to the sea. It still doesn't answer. Historians still argue whether small-time fishermen like you had real economic autonomy or were just one storm away from disaster. Some claim you could build modest wealth through consistency. Others believe the system was rigged tight, keeping you just above drowning financially and occasionally literally. You trudge home. Your hands smell like ocean and despair. You still have to clean, salt, and dry the fish, then mend the net, then prep for tomorrow. There's no such thing as off the clock here, just slightly slower suffering. Oh, and your lunch cold rice and half a pickled plum. Again, by midday, the sun hangs above like a smug overseer, watching you stagger from the shoreline with your catch. Modest as it is, you don't walk as much as wobble each step heavy with fatigue and sea-soaked clothing. Your back hurts, your hands are calloused, and your net. It needs patching again, because apparently, octopus don't appreciate being involuntary passengers. You sit outside your home, a weathered wooden shack with a slanted roof, stitched together by persistence and luck. You eat the lunch you didn't earn, but also somehow over-earned. The leftover gruel has congealed into a personality of its own, and the pickled plum now tastes like pure vinegar-drenched sorrow. You eat in silence. The sound of other families chewing in similar despair is comforting in the bleakest possible way. Then it's back to work, because cleaning fish doesn't wait. You lay your mackerel out, gutting them in one smooth motion if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, the guts spill too soon, and you get a wet slap of irony across your chest. The eel gets its revenge by slipping from your grip twice before submitting to salt and fate. The octopus tries to escape. Again. You respect it, but you still dry it. Now comes the salting coating the cleaned fish in layers of grainy preservation. Salt is expensive, but so is rotting. It's the lesser evil, much like sleeping on a wood floor instead of bare dirt. Once the catch is prepared and laid out on racks to dry, you sit again, just briefly. Because the nets are still in disrepair, you spread them across your lap, thick with brine and guilt. Mending nets is like apologizing to someone who keeps hurting you but pays your bills. Tedious, repetitive, and slightly soul-destroying. Your fingers bleed from the fine threads and embedded splinters. You don't even notice until the blood makes the rope sticky. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Many fishing villages in the Edo period operated in tight communal networks, where households shared tools, watch duties, and even boat maintenance. That sounds nice until you realize it also means you're responsible for everyone else's poorly tied knots. If a single net fails tomorrow, and it's traced back to you, expect angry knocks and passive-aggressive glares over fermented rice liquor. Some historians argue whether these fishing communities were truly cooperative utopias or just well-policed survival syndicates. Were they early examples of collectivist harmony or just desperate arrangements wrapped in social obligation? The truth, like most salted fish, lies somewhere in between. Later in the afternoon, The village's tax officer appears, clipboard-like tablet in hand, and you hand over a share of your hard-won mackerel. Yes, it stings. No, you don't argue. One does not question the system, unless one wants to spend tomorrow explaining tax evasion to a magistrate with no sense of humor and even less patience. The rest of your day is for odd jobs cleaning boats, gathering firewood, fixing the oar someone else broke and definitely blamed on you. Your muscles scream. You silence them with a resigned grunt and another task. By sunset, you stagger home again, not proud, not defeated, just suspended in function. The kids run up and ask, "Did you catch a sea monster today?" You smile, you lie. Yes, it got away. You know they're disappointed, but they'll forget. Because you'll do it all again tomorrow. As dusk turns the sky into a bruise of purples and fading red, a wind picks up from the shoreline. It's the kind that promises a storm not today, but soon. You listen to the groaning of the shutters and your neighbor arguing with a chicken. Again, that chicken knows what it did. You light the tiny oil lamp in your home. It's not much, but it's just enough to see the splinters in your knees from kneeling all day. Outside, mosquitoes gather with the enthusiasm of unpaid interns desperate for a nibble. You swat at them with the same futility as you've approached every problem today. Your room is stifling. It's not designed for airflow. It's designed for survival, which is architectural code for you might not die. The tatami mats are damp. The air smells like sweat, brine, and that one neighbor who insists on drying squid indoors. You lie down anyway. Then you get up again, because your clothes are still wet, and you'll freeze if you wear them. But if you don't wear anything, the mosquitoes will eat you alive and start a religion in your name. And then it happens rain. Sudden, loud, cold. The kind of rain that mocks your patched-up roof with a few artistic leaks. You get up, again. Find a bucket and place it under the worst drip. You hope it doesn't fill before morning. Weather, you see, is both enemy and companion. It dictates your fortune and your failures. When storms hit, you can't fish. When droughts come, saltwater eats the boats. The sun dries your catch, but also your skin. Your lips are cracked, your hands rough as bark. Summer is an oven. Winter is a meat locker. Spring brings mold. Autumn brings insects. There's no winning, just rotating discomfort. Historically, Japan's coastal climate posed constant challenges for fishermen. In the Edo-period, especially along the Pacific coast, typhoons could destroy entire fleets. But here's your fun fringe tidbit. Some fishermen would interpret sea animal behavior like the frantic movement of crabs or dolphins swimming inland as signs of an incoming storm. If the octopus is panicking, you panic too. Now, historians still argue whether these old weather-watching methods were pseudo-science or the early roots of practical meteorology. One side says they just guessed. The other says, hey, those guesses saved lives. You say either way, the squid knew something. Tonight, sleep will be difficult. You turn on your side, then the other side. The fire is low, and the wind creeps under the door. You listen to the rustling nets drying outside, the occasional thump of something or someone falling in the next house, and the rhythmic dripping from your ceiling bucket. That bucket has better time management than most people. You wrap yourself tighter in your thin blanket, worn from years of service and too many wet nights. You wonder if it'll rain tomorrow. You wonder if the ocean will be calm. You wonder if the fish will finally take pity on you and jump willingly into your net. They won't. Outside, the storm recedes into silence. And for a brief moment, you think just maybe you'll sleep. Then the chicken screams again. Your body aches before dawn even thinks about showing up. You're awake because your roof betrayed you again. Another steady drip onto your forehead. You shift to a dry spot, if such a thing exists anymore, and stare at the dim grey ceiling. This is not a luxury wake-up call. This is a slow-motion surrender. You roll out of bed onto the freezing floor, which is also the dining area, laundry zone and meditation space by default, not design. Your knees crack like old wood, your hands fumble toward a bucket. Not for bathing, no. That would be a luxury even future people rarely earn. This is your drinking water, Or at least it was before a mosquito did a backstroke in it. You trudge outside, past the row of fishing nets hanging like ghosts in the mist, toward the well. It's shared by the entire hamlet, which means it's either bone dry or suspiciously green. You lean in to draw a bucketful. Smells fine. But then again, what does fine even mean in 1675? Water in Edo-period fishing villages was either rain-caught or hand-drawn from ground wells, rarely filtered. Which means every sip is a round of microbiological roulette. You don't drink because you're thirsty. You drink because your blood requires a certain liquidity to remain inside your veins. And bathing yes, a complicated relationship. Technically, the Japanese were relatively cleaner than many societies at the time. Bathhouses existed, and even villages had crude baths heated by firewood. But for you, today with no spare firewood and a job that begins before the sunrise, the chances of a hot bath are lower than the literacy rate. You settle for a cloth wipe down, using a rag that smells like salt, mildew, and faint regret. Your skin itches not just from sweat or bug bites, but from something deeper. A kind of chemical rebellion your body stages when it knows it hasn't seen real soap in a month. You scratch until you realize you're bleeding just a little. Nothing serious, probably. Diseases, of course. Cholera, typhoid, roundworm. All thriving like partygoers at an open bar wedding. Historians still argue whether waterborne illness was the primary cause of early mortality in coastal villages, or if it simply got most of the credit because starvation was too shy to raise its hand. You gather water and haul it home. It's heavy, like always. But now your back hurts more. Your muscles throb with the weight of the day before it's even begun. This isn't just exhaustion. This is the permanent hangover of manual labor with no end date. And still, you go on. Because your family needs food. Because your neighbor's kid is crying again. Because the fish won't catch themselves you've tried asking nicely. Because you are a fisherman. Not because you chose it. Because it chose you. And if you stop now, someone else gets your place, your boat, your roof that leaks with more style than structure. You pour the water into a clay jug, cover it with a lid that's mostly functional, and breathe. Deeply. As deeply as your lungs, which inhaled mold and wood smoke all night, will allow. This is your life. Not a tragic one, not a heroic one. Just endlessly wet, itchy, tired, and necessary. You turn toward the sea, the dawn barely lifting behind you, and think today, maybe the fish will be generous. They won't. But you still hope. Because hope, unlike clean water, is dangerously renewable. Now, we wake up in the armpit of history literally and figuratively. You're curled on the third floor of a creaking Roman insula, which is a fancy way of saying apartment building made of kindling and optimism. A neighbor's toddler is crying. Someone downstairs is coughing in Latin, and the ceiling is definitely sagging a little lower than yesterday. Congratulations. You're living in wartime Rome, and it smells exactly like you'd expect a city of 1 million unwashed people to smell when aqueducts are broken and the army's off dying somewhere inconvenient. You would never think that the ancient Romans, master architects, founders of law, wearers of short skirts, could build something that wobbles when a pigeon lands on it. But here we are. The walls of your apartment groan with the weight of history, which is probably a poetic way of saying the mortar is failing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, post your location and what time it is where you're listening so I can picture a whole map of bleary-eyed history nerds slowly drifting off together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch, which is unfortunate because something in your back pops and now you're walking like a tragic statue. Your blanket is a stained wool scrap. The temperature is somewhere between clammy soup and parchment oven. You step onto the cold stone floor and immediately step back off. It's wet, and you didn't spill anything. Someone outside is shouting about bread rations again. Yesterday, it was about someone stealing a goose. The day before taxes, always taxes. Rome, even in wartime, runs on bureaucracy, loud neighbors, and rumors with the half-life of a sneeze. Your breakfast isn't waiting, it's hiding. Somewhere in your kitchen, okay. Your shelf near the broken clay stove, you have stale barley mush and a few shriveled olives. But eating those now means you'll have nothing left for dinner. Welcome to wartime math. It's less about numbers and more about how long you can trick your stomach into thinking air is food. You're not the only one doing this calculus. Every thud on the stairs is someone else heading down to the street market. Hoping today's black market price for bread is only horrifying and not mythical. You know what mythical bread costs your dignity, your sister's earrings, and probably a chicken you don't even own. Outside your tiny window, currently covered in a scrap of linen and wishful thinking, you hear the distant horn of the city watch. That means it's morning, or someone died, or both. The hornist's not very consistent, bless him. Historians still argue whether life in wartime Rome was more terrifying inside the walls or out. Inside, you're relatively safe from the barbarians, but you're absolutely not safe from fire, disease, gossip, or falling bricks. Yesterday, a man 2 floors down leaned out his window to curse at a cat and the entire archway collapsed. The cat's fine. You debate whether to go outside. But your sandals, hand-me-downs from a cousin who died in a chariot incident, are more whole than shoe. You sigh and tie them on anyway. The floor groans beneath you. One more heavy step and your building might file a complaint with the Senate. You check your money pouch, 2 bronze coins and a pebble. You keep the pebble for luck. You'll need it. You step into the street and are immediately hit with a wall of smell so dense it might qualify as a civic structure. It's a bouquet of human sweat, open sewer, fish guts, and hopeful herbs someone burned in a desperate act of air purification. The cobbled road beneath your feet is slick with something that glistens too much to be water. Welcome to the sensory landscape of Rome, where every inhale is a gamble. Your neighborhood, Subura, is what scholars politely call densely populated and what normal people would call permanently on fire. Every building leans like it's considering retirement. Washing lines crisscross the alleys like a failed attempt at string art. And yelling is the local dialect. Every corner sells something you don't want, fermented fish sauce, used sandals, cursed amulets, and yet you keep checking the prices like it might somehow help. Today, your job is simple. Survive. But the economy of Rome is in wartime free-for-all, which means the scribe shop you work at, copying legal notices, dull letters, and the occasional love poem for rich men who can't spell hasn't paid you in actual money for 2 weeks. You're now paid in bread tokens and passive-aggressive compliments like you're not completely useless. You duck into a side street and nearly collide with a cart stacked with amphorae giant clay jars filled with spoiled wine. The driver spits, not at you, but in protest of the gods or taxes or maybe just existence. Hard to tell these days. Even gods seem tired. You make it to the scribe's workshop, which is less workshop and more lean-to with a desk. The desk is a plank. Your ink is soot mixed with water and regret. The stylus is worn to a nub. Still, you sit. Because survival means pretending this is fine. Your first customer of the day is a portly man with rings on his fingers and no patience in his eyebrows. He slams down a note. It's an invoice for 2 goats, 4 amphorae, and an insultingly low bribe to a city official. You copy it, carefully. The man squints, grunts, and drops a half loaf of bread in your hand like he's bestowing gold. Your stomach growls. You share half with a street urchin who's been shadowing you all morning like a guilt-shaped ghost. She curtsies. You pretend not to notice she has no shoes. Historians still argue whether scribes were respected or tolerated. You're leaning toward tolerated, like an ink-stained mosquito. No one throws things at you, but no one makes room either. You exist in the legal margins. Literally. By mid-morning, your fingers are cramping. You've written so many declarations of debt, you start making up names. Titus the Tardy. Maximus Ocelot. No one notices. You wonder if you could sneak a poem in there. Something about how your stool has 3 legs and your soul has none. Then the warning horn blows 2 long notes. That means unrest, maybe a riot. You see a group of soldiers jog past, looking more annoyed than alarmed. You don't ask. You just lower your head and write faster. A shadow falls over your parchment. You look up. It's your supervisor. He grunts in approval not at your work, but at your decision to stay seated during a potential uprising. That's wartime loyalty, Or cowardice? Hard to tell. By noon, the air is thick with heat and whispers. People talk about grain shortages, barbarian raids, senators fleeing. You sip water from a shared jug, pretending it doesn't taste like roof tile. A pigeon lands on your desk, coos at you, and poops on the edge of your parchment. You sigh, that's tomorrow's problem. Lunch break arrives with all the excitement of a rock slowly eroding. You stand, stretch your back, bad idea, and limp towards the food stall on the corner. They call it a thermopolium. But let's not get fancy. It's a countertop with pots. The pots contain warm things. Let's call it stew. But know in your heart that stew is being generous. You hand over your crumbly bread token and get a shallow bowl of lentil mush that appears to contain one ancient carrot and something that might once have been a bean. There's also a sliver of meat, possibly rat, possibly hope. The vendor smiles like he's feeding Caesar himself. You sit on a barrel. The spoon is wooden, cracked, and questionably clean. Still, you eat. It's this or hunger. You try to chew slowly, to trick your body into thinking there's more. The lentils stick to your teeth like they're making a home there. They might be. As you eat, you watch the world. A legionnaire with a bandaged arm haggles over honey. Two children throw pebbles at a drunk man, sleeping against a statue of Jupiter. The drunk man mutters something about taxes and farts himself awake. The children run. And there's the smell again. Not the street smell, this one's worse. A public latrine is nearby. And you're reminded that Roman sanitation, while technically advanced, is still a public group project with zero privacy and a high chance of splash damage. Toilets here are long benches with holes, side by side, no dividers. Just shared eye contact and shared regret. You try not to think about it, but that's impossible, especially when someone walks past holding a sponge on a stick, the Roman substitute for toilet paper. Communal, reusable, washed only in vinegar water if the stars aligned. The good news, it's biodegradable. The bad news, so are you. Historians still argue whether these latrines were hygienic marvels or disease accelerators. Based on the smell, you lean hard toward option B. You finish the last bite of your lentils and briefly consider licking the bowl. But that's how the worms get you. Or so you've heard. You toss the bowl back at the vendor, who catches it mid-gripe about food prices. Then you wipe your mouth with your sleeve. Because napkins are for senators, there's no time to rest. You've got errands. As a scribe, you're often tasked with odd jobs delivering messages, counting crates, reading letters to men who refuse to admit they're illiterate. Today, it's inventory. You shuffle toward the merchant docks, passing temples, bathhouses, and one man who appears to be yelling at a goat. At the docks, a shipment of dyed cloth is being unloaded. You're supposed to verify the colors match what's on the ledger. There are 7 shades of purple. You squint. They all look like purple to you. But one merchant insists this one is imperial violet, while the other calls it eggplant rage. You nod and scribble. They pay you not to argue. It's late afternoon now. The sun is blistering. You can feel it cooking the top layer of your skin, which already smells faintly of ink and disappointment. You head back toward the scribe's stall, only to be interrupted by a parade. Except it's not a parade. It's a funeral, a modest one. 1 flute player, 2 wailing women, and a very bored-looking donkey. The body is wrapped in linen and carried through the crowd like a loaf of bread too big for its basket. You bow your head, respect, or at least pretend. You can't help but wonder what your own funeral might look like. Hopefully with fewer donkeys. Back at your station, your stylus waits. So do the debt scrolls. You're still thinking about the eggplant rage cloth when your stomach makes a noise that could legally qualify as public disturbance. It's evening now, meaning dinner, and you're about to find out that lunch was the golden age of your nutritional day. Dinner in wartime Rome is like asking a toddler to cook, using only sadness and leftovers. You return home, which is generous considering your home is a shared insula, an ancient Roman apartment block made of timber, brick, and wishful thinking. You live on the 3rd floor, which means the ceiling sometimes leaks, and the stairs always creak like they're trying to get out of working overtime. You unlock your room, a single dusty chamber with a wooden latch, and step into the space that somehow contains both too much and absolutely nothing. There's a clay bowl on a shelf. It contains your supper, which your neighbor cooked. You're on shared cooking duty this week, and tonight's main course is barley gruel. Barley, the working man's grain. Gruel, the working man's disappointment. It's been reheated over a charcoal burner, which is why it now tastes like someone tried to season cardboard with smoke and good intentions. You eat it slowly. Each bite is hot, bland, and slightly crunchy from the bits of grit that live in the barley sack like freeloaders. Your teeth protest, and your gums itch. But hey, at least there's no rat meat in this one. Or maybe that's the problem. You glance at your neighbor, who slurps theirs like it's ambrosia. Could be worse, they say. And they're right. You could be eating garum straight from the jar. Garum, Rome's favorite condiment, made from fermented fish guts, left in the sun until they become both liquid and legend. Historians still argue whether garum was genuinely beloved or just tolerated because taste buds hadn't evolved yet. You remember the one time you tried a spoonful. You had vivid dreams about drowning in a fish barrel and woke up swearing off sauces for a month. Garum does that to a man. The sun dips below the tiled rooftops. The room glows orange, then grey, then dark. You light a tiny oil lamp. The flame flickers weakly, like it's on strike for better wages. You consider your options: read, write, or stare blankly into the wall like a philosopher with a concussion. You pick the wall. Noise filters in through the paper-thin plaster. Someone next door is arguing about taxes. Someone above is singing badly. Someone below is vomiting, probably from the barley. You wonder, not for the first time, why you haven't just moved to the countryside. Then you remember, because in the countryside, dinner is the same, but now you're also getting trampled by pigs. You sip some water from your clay cup. It tastes like it was previously occupied by moss and sadness. You swish it around your mouth like that makes it safer. It doesn't. Still, you're lucky in a way. As a literate citizen with a job, however underpaid, you at least get to eat twice a day. Many others don't. Food shortages, military blockades, and general incompetence have turned many city blocks into queues for nothing. Some people eat acorns, some eat weeds, some eat nothing and call it fasting for the gods. The gods, of course, remain silent. There's no dessert. The concept of dessert doesn't exist unless you're rich. For you, the sweet course is not dying. And so far, you're succeeding. Barely. The air inside your room is thick with smoke and sleep. Your tunic itches, not metaphorically, but in a way that suggests your clothes are either plotting against you or are already halfway sentient. You haven't changed your tunic in 5 days. That's fine. It's your good tunic. It's woven from rough-spun wool, dyed an enthusiastic brown, the kind of brown that says, "I'm blending in with the dirt because resistance is futile." You cinch it with a leather belt that has seen better centuries. Underneath, there's a linen undertunic, or there was. You haven't seen it since the last wash day, which was sometime before the comet, or a plague, or maybe before your cousin borrowed it and moved to Gaul. And yes, you're technically a merchant, but the dress code for urban poor with literacy skills doesn't exactly allow for silk togas. That's for senators and philosophers who mostly argue about the moral implications of beards. You tug your cloak over your shoulders. It's goat wool, because sheep are luxury animals now. The cloak is heavy, stiff, and smells faintly of wet animal even when dry. But it keeps you warmish, which in Roman terms means less miserable. Your sandals are made from scrap leather and string. Technically, they're open footwear, which sounds breezy until you realize the streets of Rome are an open sewer. The moment you step outside, your toes start playing, "What did I just step in?" It's a game no one wins. You wish you had boots, or even better socks. But socks are for barbarians, literally. Roman elites considered them an uncivilized luxury. Historians still argue whether that opinion was fashion snobbery or foot-related masochism. You scratch your arm again. Fleas. They've moved in and started a family. Somewhere inside your tunic, a flea wedding is taking place. You can almost hear the fiddles. You tried getting rid of them once by boiling your clothes in vinegar and hanging them in sunlight. The fleas threw a rooftop party in your armpit that night. clean clothes in your world are like honest politicians rumored to exist but never confirmed. Laundering, such as it is, happens at public Fulonica laundries where clothes are soaked in human urine. That's not a joke. Urine contains ammonia, and ammonia is apparently what happens when chemistry meets despair. You once paid a boy to take your tunic to the Fulonica. He came back 3 hours later and said it ran away. You believed him. You scratch your back using a wooden stick you've nicknamed the diplomatic solution. The itching subsides but never truly ends. You've accepted that your relationship with hygiene is one of mutual betrayal. You glance out the window. A group of boys run past, bare-legged, tossing pebbles. One of them is shirtless, coated in dust and joy. You envy him not for the shirtlessness, but for the freedom of not noticing lice when they're biting. Your neighbor passes by in a tunic that's been patched so many times it resembles a mosaic. He waves. You nod back, admiring how he's stitched a leaf motif across his shoulder to distract from the moth holes. He once said, clothing in Rome is less about fashion and more about not freezing, not flashing, and not being arrested for impersonating a senator. There's an entire law code about who gets to wear what. As a merchant, you're squarely in the functional burlap sack category. Still, people manage. A touch of red thread here, a decorative clasp there, people will find a way to feel dignified, even if their undergarments haven't been washed since the last eclipse. So you step into the street, cloaked, sandaled, and moderately infested, ready to do business. Or at least to survive until you can sit down again and scratch without shame. Your teeth hurt. Again, not the sharp pain of something fresh and violent, more like a slow, passive-aggressive throb. The kind that suggests your molars are plotting a mutiny. You swirl your tongue over your gums, hoping the pain will magically resolve itself. It doesn't. Your breath smells like you chewed on last week's fish sauce. Welcome to Roman dental hygiene, or, more accurately, the complete absence thereof. You don't own a toothbrush. That's a barbarian luxury from the far corners of the earth. If you're lucky, you might scrape your teeth clean with a twig or rub them with crushed oyster shells. The irony is that these scrubbers are so abrasive, they probably do more harm than good. But hey, they make you feel like you're doing something. And in Rome, feeling clean is 90% of the battle. Your gums are swollen. Your breath could melt bronze. You've had the same cavity brewing for years, ever since that one bad shipment of candied dates. You bite into them with your good side now. It's a strategic dental maneuver, like flanking your opponent in battle, only your opponent is sugar. And your shield is denial. The rich, of course, have different problems. They use powdered charcoal, ash, and the occasional crushed pearl to whiten their teeth. Because nothing says oral health like grinding your enamel into oblivion for aesthetic reasons. Historians still argue whether the Roman elite actually cared about hygiene or whether it was all just theatrical performance, like washing your hands before a public sacrifice. There are no dentists. Well, not in any professionalized sense. There's a man who sharpens blades and also pulls teeth. He's called the extractor. He's also your cousin's neighbor. His preferred method is yank, hope, and try not to die. You saw it once. A woman sat on a stool, gripping the sides, and he leaned in with tongs that looked more suitable for turning pork over a fire. He counted to 2 and skipped 3. She screamed, bled, fainted, and woke up with one less problem in her mouth. You remember every second. The city reeks of garlic, oil, and mild decay, and it only gets worse as the sun climbs. Heat makes the smells bloom, and your mouth, with its neglected ecosystem, feels like a small sewer pretending to be a tongue museum. You rub your jaw and consider herbal remedies. There's mastic gum tree resin that acts like a primitive breath mint. You chew it now and then, pretending it helps. You've also tried rinsing with wine. That works if you define works as gets you drunk enough not to care. The forums sell all kinds of magical cures. Powdered boar tusk, goat bile paste, poppy seed resin. Most of them make your condition worse or numb you into euphoria, which honestly isn't the worst trade-off. The real problem is, you know it won't get better. You know this low-grade pain will eventually explode into something dramatic and life-threatening. That one day, you'll wake up with a jaw so swollen you can't speak, and someone will suggest bloodletting as a solution. You'll say no. They'll say it's tradition. Medicine in Rome is a wild guessing game. One day you're applying crushed figs to your temple. The next, someone's bleeding you because Mars is in retrograde. And while some physicians claim to understand humors and bile balances, most are just winging it with confidence and decent sandals. You've heard of people curing toothaches with a prayer to Apollo and a dead mouse hung around the neck. That's not even the weirdest remedy. Someone once recommended boiled donkey urine. You passed on that one. Even desperation has standards. As the day drags on, your headache joins the mouth pain in a symphony of discomfort. You try to distract yourself with coin counts and trade plans, but every clink echoes in your skull. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so are your teeth. Your back is stiff before sunrise. That's your cue, not the crow of a rooster, not a city bell, just pain. You swing your legs over the edge of your thin straw mat, which crackles like it's filled with old celery, and brace for another joyful day in Roman commerce. Spoiler, there will be no joy. Being a merchant in wartime Rome is like running a lemonade stand during a sandstorm. You try to stay open, but the odds are against you. Food is harder to come by. Metal prices fluctuate like a drunk senator's mood, and supply routes are constantly being liberated by bandits with better swords than the army. Today's first task, load up your ox cart and hope it doesn't splinter on the way to the forum. Your ox is named Titus. He hates his job, possibly you, and the entire concept of roads. You pat him gently and whisper threats disguised as affection. The roads, by the way, are a mixed blessing. The Roman Empire built some of the best infrastructure in the ancient world straight, solid, and full of potholes that could swallow a chariot whole. You wobble along, dodging beggars, sewage spills, and a man selling fermented fish sauce out of a leaking jar. Historians still argue whether that sauce was a delicacy or an act of communal revenge. Once at the market, it's a game of stamina and subtle insults. Merchants shout louder, undercut faster, and smile faker than any arena performer. You eye a rival selling knockoff pottery. His clay cracks in the sun, but his charm is ironclad. You hate him. He knows. You lay out your wares, salted olives, dyed cloth, imported glass beads from the East that may or may not be real. Authenticity is a spectrum, and your customers mostly want sparkle. You're surrounded by noise. Someone is arguing about the price of barley. Someone else is being pickpocketed in slow motion. A boy tugs on your tunic, offering a lump of coal shaped like a horse. You buy it. You're not sure why. This is the part where the weather kicks in. The sun blazes like it has a vendetta, and your tunic sticks to you like guilt. You wipe sweat from your eyes using the least dirty part of your sleeve. Good news, you don't have a heat rash yet. Bad news, it's only mid-morning. After a few hours of haggling, you've made enough for a small loaf of bread, a chunk of goat cheese, and maybe a seat at the bathhouse if they're not rationing water today. You consider skipping lunch to save up for a new tunic. Yours smells like regret and mildew. You load up what's left, cover it with a cloth, and head to your storage cellar if cellar means an underground hole guarded by 3 rats and a door with personality issues. It squeaks open with a noise that suggests emotional trauma. You stash your goods, bribe the rats with crumbs, and head back to the street. At this point, your legs are numb, your back is plotting mutiny, and your stomach growls in Latin. You plop onto a stone bench that's seen at least 3 plagues and wonder why no one invented cushions yet. Work never ends. You still need to visit a blacksmith, settle a dispute with a supplier, and write 3 letters by hand, of course, on papyrus that costs more than your sandals. You dip a crude reed pen into ink and ruin your first sentence. It's fine. No one in Rome writes cleanly. It's tradition. You drift home at dusk, exhausted, bruised, and somehow covered in flour. A child runs past you screaming about soldiers. You nod. Same. Kid. Same. You wake again in the middle of the night, not because you're rested, but because the wind has shifted. Cold air cuts through the wooden slats of your house like a nosy neighbor with an opinion. You tug your blanket tighter, which is heroic considering it's more holes than fabric and smells faintly of pickled fish and despair. Congratulations, it's winter in wartime Rome. Your breath fogs the air, your fingers are stiff, and your nose has begun its slow descent into iciclehood. Fire sure, if you can afford the wood, the last time you tried to light a fire indoors. The smoke convinced your neighbor you were being assassinated by ghosts. That ended with 6 people in your kitchen yelling "Exorcizo te" and one guy stealing your loaf of bread. By morning, your joints creak more than your door. You wrap yourself in layers of wool, if layers means 2 threadbare tunics and a scarf that's mostly symbolic, and head out. The cold slaps you like a disapproving senator. Historians still argue whether winter was more deadly to Romans than the Gauls. You're currently leaning toward yes. Now the sky spits snow. Not the gentle, postcard kind. This is sharp, stinging snow that gets in your eyes, your ears, and places snow should not be. The cobbled streets are slick with slush, and every step is a negotiation. People fall. No one laughs. Laughter is for warmer months. But wait, maybe summer will be better. Ah, summer, that magical time when everything smells like warm meat, even things that aren't meat. Your home turns into a clay oven. The walls absorb heat with the enthusiasm of a Roman senator accepting a bribe. At night, you lie awake, soaked in sweat and existential dread, praying for a breeze and cursing the gods of humidity. Flies descend like tourists at a chariot race. You fan yourself with a broken amphora shard and try to remember what cool air felt like. You dream of snow. Yes, even the stabbing kind. Outside, the roads shimmer with heat. Horses look like they're rethinking their life choices. The forum is quieter in summer, not because people stay home, but because they're too dehydrated to shout properly. The public fountain, your main water source, smells vaguely of boiled feet. Insects rule now. Mosquitoes the size of grapes. Bees with anger issues. And then the worst gnats. They get in your ears, your eyes, your soul. You wave them off with the fury of a man who's had enough. But they return, somehow stronger. The irony, you still wear roughly the same clothes year-round. Romans had seasonal fashion, like a sponge has a skincare routine. So in winter, you freeze. In summer, you bake. And in both, you itch, constantly. From sweat, from fleas, from life. Oh, and rain. Let's not forget that. Rome's roads are famously well constructed. But even they can't prevent puddles from becoming small inland seas. You once lost a sandal in one and mourned it for a week. Still, every day you make your rounds. Whether the wind is biting or the sun is scalding. You show up to sell, trade, plead, and endure. Your reward, a warm stew, a mug of sour wine, and maybe just maybe a moment when the wind stills or the night cools enough for your brain to forget where you are. Then the next season rolls in, and you start the circus all over again. You blink at your reflection in the fountain. The water is moving. Barely. It's got a film on it now, greenish, like the inside of a poorly kept wine jug. But it's water, and technically you need it to live. You hesitate just long enough to make the bacteria feel welcome. Then dip your cup. Every Roman knows water is both friend and frenemy. In theory, it sustains you. In practice, it betrays you. Boiling it helps assuming you have fuel, time, and the luxury of paranoia. Otherwise, you drink and hope the gods like you. Spoiler, they usually don't. You take a sip and instantly regret it. It's warm, tastes faintly of copper and wet stone. And there's a suspicious crunch. That might have been a beetle. It's best not to look. Bathing, that's cute. That's a rich person thing. Unless you count your rain-drenched toga walk home as immersion therapy. You haven't had a proper wash in days. Or was it weeks? Historians still argue whether daily bathing was common or just a flex among the elite. For you, it's a logistical nightmare. The public baths are incredible, massive, ornate, marvels of engineering. They're also not free. And during war, they're closed more than open, or worse, full of soldiers using the hot steam rooms as therapy and recruiting centers. Not to mention the rumors of lice parties, fungal surprises, and at least one confirmed rat who swims better than you. If you do get in, you strip naked in a room full of strangers, give your clothes to a kid with a stick. Why are they always so aggressive with that stick? And try not to die from hypothermia or humiliation. The water is murky. Someone's always loudly philosophizing. There's always a guy shaving his chest with a knife. You leave feeling somehow dirtier. And then there are days when the aqueducts slow to a trickle. Sabotage, earthquake, divine smiting. Take your pick. You scramble with everyone else, buckets in hand, to find water, any water, wells, puddles, a leaky ceiling. You once considered scooping rainwater off a marble statue's thigh. It wasn't your proudest moment. You adapt. You learn to ration. You drink when you must and pray afterward. You wipe your face with your sleeve and convince yourself it counts as a wash. And when someone offers wine, you accept not for the taste, but because fermented grape juice is statistically safer than whatever's dribbling out of the aqueduct. Your skin cracks from dryness, your lips split, your stomach flips unpredictably, like a badly made chariot wheel. But you keep going. You've got goods to move and coins to count. Your body is 70% despair and 30% questionable liquid. But you're still standing. Every drop is a gamble. Every bath, a luxury. Every barrel, a potential Pandora's amphora. And yet, here you are alive, unbathed and slightly glowing in the dark. Possibly the water's fault. And now, as night falls and you hear the burble of another rainstorm rolling in, you wonder, could you survive this again tomorrow? Probably not. Now, we wake up in ancient Egypt under the reign of the pharaohs, where the pyramids cast long shadows over a world that's somehow both majestic and miserable. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the room you're sleeping in is already unreasonably warm. You're lying on a mat stuffed with papyrus stalks that poke your spine like they're trying to escape their own afterlife. The floor is packed earth, your blanket is yesterday's sweat, and your roomsmate is a goat. Yes, a real goat named things like meat or rent insurance, depending on your family's optimism. You would never think that a civilization with gold-covered tombs would forget to invent windows. But here we are. The walls are made of mud brick, insulated to keep out heat, which, in theory, should help. In practice, it means your room traps air like a clay oven. You're already sweating, and you haven't even moved. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your current location and what time you're watching this, bonus points if you're sweating too. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift your aching limbs and sit up. Your back cracks in 3 places. You're 19, but that's middle-aged here. You shuffle to the corner where your sandals wait, curling up like sleeping dogs. They're made of reeds and smell faintly of mildew and regret. You step outside and immediately eat a faceful of sand. The wind is always doing that, blasting through the alleyways like an unpaid debt collector. The village is waking up. Roosters scream, children scream louder, and someone is already arguing over dates. The fruit kind, not the romantic kind. No one has time for love when granaries are empty and your only job security is divine favor. You look around your home. It's 2 rooms if you squint, one for sleeping, one for everything else. There's a cooking area with no chimney, so the whole space smells like last week's barley stew. There are no beds, no chairs, no sinks. Furniture isn't common unless you count the upside-down basket that doubles as a table, stool, and pest control. And there's no privacy. You share this space with your parents, your 3 siblings, 1 goat, and sometimes an uncle who drops by when his wife is mad at him. Conversations are public, bodily functions are public. And if you cry, someone hands you a turnip and tells you to get over it. Outside, the Nile glows faintly in the distance, like a benevolent god or a slow-moving sewer. Depending on the season, the morning light bounces off the temples and reflects down onto the dusty streets, casting long, pyramid-shaped shadows. You stretch and yawn, trying to mentally prepare for the day ahead. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so are your fleas. You scratch your scalp and mutter a half-hearted prayer to Thoth, or maybe Bastet, honestly. At this point, you'll take help from any divine department that covers plagues of the personal hygiene variety. The day has begun. Your first challenge isn't spiritual enlightenment or writing elegant hieroglyphs, it's finding a place to relieve yourself. Welcome to the ancient Egyptian toilet experience, a combination of hide and seek, smell endurance training, and social vulnerability therapy. There are no bathrooms in your home. That luxury belongs to temples, elite households, or maybe some blessed administrative buildings with latrine pits, though historians still argue whether those were genuinely private or just ceremonial outhouses to impress visiting scribes. For you, the options are simpler and more horrifying. There's the go-in-a-pot method, which involves a clay jar discreetly tucked behind a curtain, read a fraying linen sheet. Or you can shuffle barefoot through the alleyways to the communal spot. Guess which one smells slightly worse? This so-called latrine is more of a dirt trench with some palm fronds tossed over it, like a half-hearted gift wrap. It's surrounded by buzzing flies the size of date pits and watched over by a cat who appears to be silently judging everyone. Ancient Egyptians loved their cats, but that doesn't mean the cats loved you back, especially not while you're squatting near their sunbeam. Toilets are a kind of public theatre here. You don't really get privacy, but you do get conversation. It's common to discuss grain prices, neighbors' marriages, or how bad yesterday's beer was while hovering over the trench. It's oddly communal, in a we all suffer together way. Now for the cleanup. No toilet paper, no water, just sand. Maybe a shard of broken pottery if you're feeling fancy. Archaeologists call these ostraca. But let's be honest, that's just academic branding for sharp things someone regretted using. Some historians still argue whether cloth wipes were available to the working class, or if they were a pharaonic perk. You, tragically, are not a pharaoh. You make your way back home. Wiping your hands on your tunic, yes, it's disgusting. But there's no running water, no hand soap, and certainly no little lavender-scented bottle from a spa. You spit into your hands and rub them together, because ancient self-cleaning sometimes means using spit like it's Purell. By the time you return, your little sister has started pounding grain on the kitchen floor, not in a kitchen, just on it. The rhythmic thunk echoes off the mud brick walls and mixes with the sound of the neighbor's baby screaming like he's being sacrificed to Anubis. He's not. Yet. You're not disgusted anymore. You're used to it. That's the most dangerous part, normalcy. Filth, odor, open-air embarrassment, it all blends into your routine. Like sand in your food or lies in politics. And this, right here, is the glamorous underbelly of life beneath the pyramids. You don't choose breakfast. Breakfast chooses you, and sometimes it chooses to slap you right in the taste buds with a mixture of monotony, grit, and mild despair. You start your day with bread. Not just any bread, this is the ancient Egyptian version of a culinary curveball. Hard enough to double as a building material, gritty enough to count as a mild exfoliant, and dense enough that you consider using a chisel rather than your teeth. It's made from emmer wheat, which is nutritious, but thanks to the grindstones used, it comes with a generous side of sand and tiny stone fragments. Dental insurance. You don't even have shoes. Historians still argue whether the average worker had access to more than just this daily bread. But let's assume you're not one of the lucky few dining in temple kitchens. You grab a small bowl of beso, a fermented barley drink that's equal parts beer, mush, and weirdly tangy oatmeal. It's probably safer than water, which is a low bar considering the Nile is the empire's sewer. Bathtub, water fountain, and graveyard all in one. Sometimes there's onion, sometimes fish, salted beyond recognition, sometimes a fig if someone in your household flirted successfully at the market. But often it's bread, beso, and a vague memory of taste. There's no coffee, but there is fatigue. You chew the bread slowly because you have to, not for digestion, but for survival. Every bite risks a chipped molar. This isn't a meal, it's a dental standoff. Your family eats silently. The only sounds are slurps and crunches and someone wheezing from a dust-induced cough. You sit on the ground, legs folded, surrounded by bowls made of clay and optimism. A fly lands on your cheek. You don't bother swatting it. You've lost that energy weeks ago. Food is precious, so there's no such thing as leftovers. Even the crusts, even the crumbs. You mop the bowl with your bread and swallow whatever slurry is left. Flavor optional. Calories mandatory. The kitchen is a corner of your home, defined only by a mat and a few fire-blackened stones. Smoke clings to the ceiling like a passive-aggressive houseguest. There's no chimney smoke, just finds the nearest exit. Usually your lungs. A few jokes are exchanged, weak ones, recycled ones. This bread's so stale it remembers the last dynasty. Your father mutters. You almost smile. Almost. The truth is, your entire meal is a balancing act between eating enough to work and working enough to afford to eat. If you're lucky, you'll get more at the evening meal, maybe lentils, maybe a smidge of goat cheese. But breakfast, this is functional suffering with a side of fiber. Oh, and speaking of fiber, you'll need it. Remember the trench from earlier? Let's just say your digestive system needs all the help it can get when your diet is 78% stone-laced grain and 22% swamp beer. Now wipe your hands on your tunic again. Take a deep breath of burnt barley air. And prepare to work like your life and next meal depends on it. Because it does. You step outside into the blast furnace that is Egypt at dawn, your stomach full of bread rocks and barley soup sludge. It's time to work. Not in a 9 to 5 with coffee breaks kind of way. More like from sunrise until you drop and then keep going kind of way. Welcome to the ancient labor economy where rest is myth, water is fantasy, and complaining is an Olympic sport that no one has time to play. Your job today hauling limestone or mixing mud brick, or maybe fetching buckets of water from a well half a mile away because your neighbor's goat kicked over your family's ceramic storage jar. Honestly, the details blur. All you know is the work begins before the sun rises and ends only when you feel like the sun has moved into your bones. The tools are simple, which is history's polite way of saying utterly backbreaking. A wooden hoe, a basket strapped to your back, a rope that's never long enough and always frays at the worst moment. No gloves, no boots, just your bare, dusty feet and a tunic that is absolutely not optimized for movement, comfort, or dignity. You sweat a lot. Ancient Egypt may have had pyramids, but it definitely did not have deodorant. The air smells of human effort, sun-scorched stone, and faintly fermented breath. Your skin grows sticky with a mix of dust and your own salty shame. Somehow, there's always a supervisor nearby. He doesn't do much except yell, his stick decorative, unless you stop moving. Historians still argue whether laborers were paid in rations or coin, but your back doesn't care. It just wants to not hurt anymore. You glance over at your friend hauling clay. He's 12. His spine already has opinions about the future. Children work, everyone works. If you're not working, you're probably dead or being prepared for burial, which requires more work, just not from you. Women are grinding grain, baking flatbread, weaving linen, and watching 6 children at once with the kind of multitasking that would break a modern smartphone. One hand on the spindle, the other preventing toddler number 4 from faceplanting into a fire pit. You dream of a break, just one shady corner, one gulp of clean water, one moment without sand grinding into your eye. But instead, it's more hauling, more lifting, more pretending your spine isn't starting a revolution. Your diet doesn't support this kind of effort. You burn through your barley energy by mid-morning and operate on spite for the rest of the day. No protein shake, no electrolytes, just an occasional fig, if you're lucky, and the distant hope that you won't collapse in front of the foreman. And yet, you laugh. A little. Someone farts dramatically while pushing a wheelbarrow of dung, and the noise cuts through the heat like a divine blessing. Jokes are currency. So are calloused hands, cracked heels, and sunburns shaped like your neckline. By sunset, you're not walking, you're swaying, dragging, melting. Your muscles scream with every step, and your soul politely requests a new body. You arrive home and collapse into the same smoke-stained mat you woke up on. Dinner is probably another round of dental roulette bread, maybe with lentils. You're too tired to taste anything anyway. Your body isn't asking for pleasure, it's just begging for sleep. But sleep will have to wait. First, you must navigate the terrifying ordeal of Egyptian medicine. Because tomorrow, you have a toothache. You wake up before the rooster crows. Because your molar has declared war. It's not a gentle throb. No. It's the kind of pain that radiates through your jaw, your ear, and somehow, your moral compass. You'd swear your teeth are vibrating. There is no toothbrush, no toothpaste, and definitely no appointment with Dr. D. Papyrus, DDS. You're on your own in the great dental apocalypse of 1250 BCE. This is ancient Egypt, where dental hygiene is more of a concept than a practice. The average person's mouth is a museum of damage. The culprit bread. It always comes back to bread, not the soft, fluffy kind you dream of. Egyptian bread is coarse, full of sand, and basically an edible grindstone. Every bite gently files your teeth into oblivion. The Nile floods bring silt into the grain. The grinding process adds more grit. And by the time that bread reaches your mouth, it's less meal and more dental sabotage. Historians still argue whether Egyptians understood the long-term effects of their grain-heavy, sand-seasoned diet. Some believe they used herbal mouth rinses and toothpicks. Others suggest prayers and incense played a bigger role in oral care than anything resembling science. Either way, you're in agony. And what's the remedy for a rotten tooth in Pharaoh's realm? Pliers. Stone pliers. Well, not pliers exactly, more like a determined neighbor with a chisel and a drinking problem. You sit on the floor, gripping your knees while a friend tries to wiggle the infected tooth free with a copper tool that looks more suited for woodworking than surgery. There is no anesthetic, just a leather strap to bite. Which is ironic, since biting is the reason you're in this mess to begin with. The pain is apocalyptic. You scream into the void, hoping Ra, god of the sun, will smite you with a mercy bolt. He doesn't. He's busy. Eventually, the tooth pops free or breaks in half. Either way, there's blood, some faint crying, and a vague hope you won't get a fatal infection from the unwashed hands of your would-be dentist. You rinse with beer. Yes, beer. Because it's cleaner than the water, and at this point, it doubles as medicine, mouthwash, and emotional support. You'd think things couldn't get worse, but the next morning, your gums swell like angry balloons. You look like you're storing a papyrus scroll in your cheek. No antibiotics, no antiseptic, just a poultice made of honey, onion, and hope. Oddly, honey helps. It has antimicrobial properties. Ancient Egyptians were obsessed with it. They used honey on everything: wounds, eyes, embalming corpses. So naturally, you smear it all over your aching gums and try to believe this is medicine, not dessert in the wrong location. Meanwhile, your breath could kill a scarab beetle. You'd brush, but there's nothing to brush with. Some elite classes used frayed sticks or ash mixed with natron, basically salt, plus baking soda. But you're not elite. You're lucky if your mouth doesn't attract flies. And when it's too much, there's always ritual. The priest offers spells to soothe your pain, chants the names of gods with healing powers. Whether they work or not is beside the point. It's the only thing that feels like comfort in this molar madness. You lie in bed that night, mouth throbbing, face hot, jaw twitching. You survived another day of bread-related trauma, medical improvisation, and early morning scream therapy. But tomorrow is coming, and tomorrow, you go back to work. You shuffle out of your mud brick dwelling, clutching your jaw and trying not to wince. Unfortunately, the day does not pause because you're in pain. No one asks if you're okay. This is ancient Egypt. Sick leave is a concept for the gods, not for you. You are a laborer, and laborers labor. That's your role in the cosmic order. Mut. The divine principle of harmony somehow includes your back-breaking routine under 40-degree heat. You grab your worn tools, a wooden hoe, a basket woven from reeds, and something that may have once resembled a shovel if you squint and join the line of hunched workers headed for the fields. It's not glamorous. There is no golden chariot waiting. There is no breakfast buffet. You're lucky if you had a few sips of sour beer and a lump of yesterday's bread, which now doubles as both food and a potential building material. You wade into the fields, the mud squelching beneath your bare feet. Yes, bare, because sandals wear out quickly and are a luxury not afforded to people like you. Your soles have the texture of tree bark. Your toenails are interpretive. With a groan, you begin digging irrigation channels. Or maybe you're planting barley or hauling clay. Honestly, it all blurs together into a single sweaty montage of stooping, lifting, sweating, swatting flies, and hearing someone yell faster. Women are out here too. There's no gender equality movement, yet just shared exhaustion. They're hauling water, grinding grain, gathering reeds, weaving linen, and somehow keeping toddlers from wandering into crocodile territory. Multitasking, but in survival mode. Children are not spared. If you can walk, you can work. Small hands carry firewood, chase chickens, or help shape bricks. Playtime is not scheduled. It occasionally happens by accident if someone drops a tool. You look over and see your neighbor, an older man, slumped under a fig tree. He's been laboring since the reign of the last pharaoh. His eyes are tired. His joints make noises that violate the laws of acoustics. He mutters about the good old days when at least the tools were heavier, so you didn't have to make as many trips. Historians still argue whether laborers like you were paid in beer, bread, or just survival. Some evidence suggests a wage system involving rations. Others say you worked under corvée, a kind of state-enforced obligation where not working meant trouble, possibly involving guards with sticks. You get a 15-minute break around noon. That's enough time to sit on a rock, pour some lukewarm beer into a cracked cup, and reflect on how your life has somehow become a cautionary tale for the future. Then it's back to the grind. Literally. You spend the afternoon helping build a granary wall, which is ironic, because you personally have no grain. You lug baskets of sun-baked bricks, line them up, slather them in mud mortar, and pray the sun doesn't boil your brain like a poorly stored fish. And at the end of the day, you're not done. You drag your aching body home and still have to help your household mend clothes, grind more grain, chase the goat that keeps chewing the roof. There's no gym, no Pilates, no ergonomic anything. Just labor, pure, unfiltered, joint-destroying labor. And yet, you lie down that night on a mat under a buzzing cloud of flies, with a cracked tooth and a sore spine, and you realize something weird. You survived, barely. But you did. You wake up to the sound of something dropping on your head. It's a beetle, a big one. It lands with authority, as if it owns the place. You swat it away half-heartedly and sit up, the stiffness in your neck suggesting that your mat spent the night plotting against your spine. Congratulations. It's another day in Egypt, and that sun, once again, rises with zero chill. You step outside and are immediately reminded of your eternal frenemy, the weather. There are 2 seasons in your part of the Nile, hot, and somehow even hotter. And today it's the second one. Already, sweat begins to form behind your knees, which is an impressive feat considering you've only been vertical for 30 seconds. You're a laborer, or a scribe, or a merchant, doesn't matter. Everyone has to deal with the sky fire. The rich might have shade and thick walls and linen fans wielded by exhausted servants. But you get a woven reed hat and a prayer to the gods of not getting heat stroke. The wind carries dust, always dust. It gets in your eyes, your mouth, your clothes. It's so fine that you breathe it in without noticing, and then cough it out like you're auditioning for a sandstorm. Your teeth crunch when you chew. During winter, you might think you're in for a reprieve. The air cools a little, which sounds great until your house turns into a stone refrigerator. There's no insulation. Your bed is still a mat. Your only defense is a scratchy wool blanket that somehow manages to be both too thin and too itchy. You curl into a ball like a shivering cat and hope your nose doesn't fall off in the night. And a summer, oh summer, the kind of heat where the walls sweat. You swear you once saw a chicken lay a hard-boiled egg. You learn to do everything slowly, not for spiritual reasons, but because if you move too fast, your brain might liquefy. You understand, deeply and spiritually, the concept of melting into the floor. Clothes offer no help. You have one linen tunic that used to be white. Now it's more of a historically significant beige. You wash it when the Nile floods, which is to say, almost never. It clings to your body when you sweat, which is all the time. And when a breeze hits, it becomes a soggy flag of surrender. You don't sleep well either. The nights are either too cold or too hot, depending on the time of year. Either way, you lie awake, listening to the chorus of frogs, jackals, and the occasional human scream from someone stepping on a scorpion in the dark. And the bugs thrive. Mosquitoes the size of grapes, beetles that clack when they walk, flies with PhDs in finding your nostrils. Still, the sun is revered. It's Ra, after all, the celestial ruler. So you respect it while also cursing it under your breath like a guilty heretic. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians truly saw the weather as divine punishment or just an annoying fact of life. There are poems that praise the sun for giving life. And there are probably unrecorded grunts from farmers who would have traded a pharaoh's gold for one decent thunderstorm. You trudge through it all, sweat pouring, skin burning, eyelids sticky from dust and heat. Because you have to. There is no escape. There is only the next hour. And the next. And the beetle. Back again. This time, with friends. You could drink something. You think, you should drink something. But here's the ancient Egyptian hydration dilemma. The Nile is both your savior and your saboteur. On the one hand, it provides everything: irrigation, transportation, fishing, bathing, even some ancient proto-Instagram sunset vibes if you squint just right. On the other hand, it's also a soup of fish guts, crocodile waste, decaying offerings, and whatever your neighbor just dumped upstream. You approach the water jar in your home. It's ceramic, it's chipped, and it's holding the closest thing to drinking water you have Nile filtered, sun-warmed, and lovingly seasoned with sediment. It smells like a pond that's seen things. You take a sip, your stomach gurgles, somewhere deep inside. Your gut bacteria start texting each other. It's happening again. Boiling it helps. Sometimes, if you have time, and firewood. And the patience not to chug it before it cools down and peels the skin off your tongue. Bathing technically a thing, but culturally risky. Ancient Egyptians prized cleanliness, sure, but they also feared that bathing too often opened the pores to welcome disease. You're expected to rub natron, a mixture of baking soda and literal salt, into your armpits instead of soap. So you exfoliate with chemistry class and call it a spa day. You bathe infrequently. And when you do, it's an event. You strip, you wade into water that is colder than you remembered, and immediately get bitten by something. Probably a mosquito, possibly a worm. You scrub yourself with a palm fiber sponge, trying not to think about the crocodile that sunbathed here yesterday. Then you dry off with the same cloth you used to mop the floor. Cleanliness is a social illusion, and you're doing great. There are communal bathhouses, of course, but they're more like gossip arenas with buckets. Everyone talks, everything echoes, and someone is always laughing. You suspect it's about you. And yet, people in this era are obsessed with being clean. They shave their heads to avoid lice. They perfume their wigs. And they even use crocodile dung as contraception, which is impressive, if horrifying. You dab scented oil on your wrists and neck, not because it works, but because it masks the smell of daily survival for about 6 minutes. And you pray because that's what you do when water might heal or kill. You offer to Sobek, god of the Nile, asking for purification and mercy and maybe just a bug-free bath. Historians still argue whether people truly feared the spiritual corruption of dirty water more than the physical diseases. But either way, you're caught in the splash zone of both. You remember last month's diarrhea outbreak? That was fun. You bonded with your neighbors through moaning. You all swore off raw fish forever. Until tomorrow. Probably. As you step outside, still parched, still unsure if you're technically clean or just ceremonially damp. A boy runs past you with a bucket of water that sloshes onto your tunic. You sigh. Congrats. That's your bath for the day. You can't live without water. But in Egypt, it's not always clear you can live with it either. Night falls over the settlement like a hot cloth thrown on a fevered brow. You retreat indoors, or rather, into your box-shaped oven of clay bricks and darkness, hoping for rest. But knowing better, the air doesn't cool. It thickens. It sticks to your skin like steamed linen. You lie on a mat made of woven reeds that poke your ribs in places that seem medically impossible. And you try to sleep while sweat pools behind your knees and every itch feels like an insult. Outside, jackals howl, somewhere not far off. Someone is still arguing, possibly over goats, possibly just because shouting makes the mosquitoes flee. You curl up tighter, wrap your arms around your middle, and wish you had the energy to dream of a cooler life. Maybe one with personal space, or deodorant, or ceiling fans, but no, you live in Pharaoh's Egypt. And here, survival is a full-time performance, equal parts reverence, resourcefulness, and ridiculous rituals you can't escape. You offer prayers to gods you don't dare offend. obey rules you barely understand, and maintain a work ethic that would make modern bosses weep with joy and unions spontaneously combust. You get up at dawn, you work until exhaustion. You follow the rhythms of floods and taxes. You smile through toothaches and lice and the ceremonial application of animal fats to your face. Why? Because everyone else is doing it. And because, frankly, it beats being on the wrong side of a temple decree. As you lie there, blinking at the ceiling shadows, you hear it the priest's late-night chant carried by the breeze. A reminder that the gods are always listening and that you, noble meat sack of clay and sweat, must always be presentable. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians were truly obsessed with order or just deeply afraid of chaos. But either way, you've bought into it. And now, like the thousands before you and the millions after, you keep going. Not because it's easy, but because stopping isn't an option. The Nile may gift you silt and flood and life. But it also takes your health, your privacy, your patience. And it's not done yet. And yet you're still here. Just don't drink the water. Word count 536. Wind down, let your breath slow. You've done enough today, survive dusty roads, divine bureaucracy, and the mildly homicidal toilet conditions of a civilization that built pyramids. But not plumbing. Your body aches in unfamiliar places. Your stomach complains, not from hunger, but from the memory of what you dared to call dinner. Still, the candlelight flickers gently on your stone wall, and for a moment, just a moment, it feels like peace. You stretch out on your mat. The night air cools slightly. Someone nearby is playing a flute, or maybe it's just the wind weaving through the reeds. Either way, it hums softly, like a lullaby written for those too tired to complain. Tomorrow, the Nile rises again. The priests chant again. You'll wake up, rinse off with yesterday's regrets, and keep living this dusty miracle called Egypt. But for now, let it all go. The gods are watching, yes, but they can wait. You've earned your rest.